Holland, October 1944. A reconnaissance patrol from the 101st Airborne Division had been tasked with capturing 2 German prisoners of war behind enemy lines. They came back with 32. This is the story known as The Incredible Patrol. It was published in Life magazine in 1945. After that, it was largely forgotten. Until now. It is a typical Dutch polder landscape. Meadows with scattered farms behind high dikes near the river. This area was called the Island by the soldiers of the 101st Airborne Division, with the Lower Rhine on the north side and the Waal River on the south. A month earlier, the 101st Airborne had helped liberate Eindhoven in the south of the Netherlands during Operation Market Garden. A breakthrough across the Rhine failed. Arnhem turned out to be a bridge too far. After the failed airborne operation, the division was tasked with defending the island, 8 miles southwest of Arnhem. But what are the Germans planning? The battle for Arnhem has made it clear that the Germans do not intend to accept defeat. The Americans would like to know what the Germans are planning. The headquarters of the 101st Airborne Division has therefore already given orders to take a few German prisoners of war on the north side of the river to interrogate them. As an intelligence officer, Lieutenant Hugo Sims has already ordered several battalions to carry out such a patrol, but that had not yielded any results. Sims decides to set up a patrol to the north of the river himself to show how it's done. You cross the river at night. You sneak through the German lines in the dark. During the day, you hide in a house that functions as an observation post. You report enemy traffic by radio. You take a few prisoners and return in the dark a day later. How difficult can it be? Sims has selected a house on aerial photographs along the Arnhemseweg, 5 miles west of Arnhem and 4 miles behind the front line. That house can serve as an observation post, and with a bit of luck, a few German soldiers will also camp there, so he will immediately have 2 prisoners of war. Sims chooses 3 volunteers from his own intelligence office for the patrol. The team is completed by Sergeant Peter Frank, who was born in Austria and speaks fluent German. The 5 paratroopers set off in 2 small rubber boats during the night of October 29th to 30. The crossing of the Lower Rhine goes without any problems, but as the men crawl between the German lines, a flare suddenly goes up. The men immediately stand still. Sergeant Peter Frank translates what the Germans say. "Why the flares?" asks a nervous German. "Someone heard something," another German answers. After walking through meadows and forests, the Americans arrive at a parking lot full of German vehicles. Despite pleas from the soldiers, Sims vetoes. No car will be stolen. They continue walking. However, the parking lot is noted on a staff map. The American artillery can later fire a few grenades at it. The group is now near Wolf Hees. By the time Sims and his men pass the railroad, the atmosphere in the group is jolly. Bob Nikolai is casually munching on carrots he found in a vegetable garden, and Sergeant Peter Frank is chatting in German to the other men in the group. Well before sunrise, the Americans arrive at the Arnhemseweg. In the house where the Americans enter, they find 2 sleeping Germans. Sergeant Frank interrogates the 2 German prisoners of war. They cannot believe that they have been taken prisoner 4 miles behind the front, but Frank tells them that it is indeed true, and that the next night they will be taken to the American lines on the other side of the river. The 2 Germans warn that they will be picked up that morning. Lieutenant Hugo Sims has installed himself in the attic with a radio. He informs the American headquarters by radio that German convoys with troops and artillery have been driving past the house all morning in the direction of Arnhem. The number of prisoners has meanwhile risen to 7. First, there is a German who wants to water his horses in the yard. Then a military postman comes by. Later, there are 2 German soldiers who want to use the house to avoid their duty for a few hours. And finally, a German comes by with a horse and cart to pick up the first 2 Germans. Towards nightfall, Lieutenant Sims decides that it might be a bit difficult to walk back to the Rhine with 7 prisoners of war. While being held at gunpoint by the Americans from the side of the road, the German postman is put on the road with the order to stop a German truck. But almost the first thing that passes by is a German motorcyclist. It stops on its own. He knows the postman with whom he had previously fought in a regiment on the Eastern Front. The motorcyclist is prisoner of war number 8. A little later, a German truck passes by and is stopped by the postman. But the surprise is great when the Americans open the tarpaulin at the back of the truck. The truck is full of dozing SS soldiers. Lieutenant Sims gives the order to disarm the drowsy SS men. Together with the 8 prisoners of war they already had, the Americans crammed themselves into the back of the truck. Lieutenant Sims and Sergeant Peter Frank sit next to the driver in the cab. The Americans have barely started their journey when they are cornered by a German Schwimmwagen. Inside is a German captain who wants to know why his soldiers are suddenly driving in the other direction. The German captain and his driver are simply disarmed and placed in the back of the truck. The patrol now has 24 prisoners of war. After a few kilometers, Lieutenant Sims makes it clear to the driver that he must leave the main road and take a path on the right side of the road. The driver does as he is told, but after a few hundred meters, the truck gets stuck in the mud. Everyone gets out and continues walking. The SS captain sees his opportunity and runs away. American soldier Bob Nikolai immediately gives chase. Moments later, 2 shots ring out. A short time later, a broadly grinning Bob Nikolai appears with the German officer. Sims then instructs Peter Frank to tell the Germans that it is a lot easier to shoot them on the spot than to take them away. In the next escape attempt, that is what he will do. Sims's words have an effect. There are no more problems for the rest of the trip. After a few hours, the large group reached the village of Renkum, near the banks of the Lower Rhine. Since it was almost daylight, Sims decided to march right through the village. He told Life magazine, "The Germans had those boots with spikes that made a lot of noise. People would probably think it was just a group of Germans heading for the front line. Sometimes being bold is the best thing you can do." The Americans now have one more problem. Germans lie in foxholes between the village and the riverbank to guard the river. Sims said about this, "We could see German soldiers there in foxholes at the edge of the river. I ran to a foxhole and without giving an order, 2 of my men ran to the other 2 foxholes. In this way, another 8 Germans are taken prisoner. The patrol now has 32 prisoners of war." After Sims uses light signals to signal the Americans on the south side of the river, rubber boats are sent. The boats have to sail back and forth 11 times to transfer all the prisoners of war. Lieutenant Sims and his team are showered with praise and admiration upon their return. Sims is awarded the Distinguished Service Cross and promoted to captain. A journalist from Life magazine reports the story for the January 15, 1945 issue. The 101st Airborne Division is long gone from the island at that time. The division has been in full combat for a month during the Ardennes offensive.